either you guys remember things really well, or some of you guys looked over this material. Did you guys look over it? Okay, it's kind of nice to skim through it. You don't have to know everything to come to class, but the more familiar you are, the better like discussion we can have, and the more clear you can be about questions that you have about the topic. So, we're talking about what are those four tissues that we decided were part of the periodontium. Gingiva, PDL, alveolar bone. So this chapter goes through what makes up each of those things, okay, on a microscopic level, which you may not have seen before, okay? We're getting deeper into those tissues and understand what makes them up, how they're formed, and then later on in this class, how they can be destroyed, right? So in perio, and then how to try to get them back into health. So, this goes through each section. I believe it starts with gingiva. We'll see. Rack my brain. I was studying it. I studied it last week. Restudied it. And then I had it in clinic with me yesterday looking at it. So, do y'all know the word histology?
Yes.
The study of
Tissues.
Okay, yeah, tissues, the microscopic features of tissues, that's called histology. You guys learn that in embryology too, like there's a little bit of histology that goes into that. When we do pathology or any pathology courses that I go to, we usually talk about histology because pathology is the changing of cells, right? So those cells start to change and do different things. So oral cancers and tumors and all of those things are happening on a histological level. So the more you can understand that, the better your base understanding of those diseases is. So it's knowledge of those microscopic characteristics. The definition of tissue is a group of interconnected cells. And we are going to talk about the four basic types of tissue. So there's four types: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, nerve tissue, and muscle tissue. Where is epithelial tissue located? In your mouth, right? Your oral mucosa is made up of epithelial tissue. That's what we really want to focus on. And then any idea what some of the connective tissues are that we're going to talk about?
Connective tissue.
So that's epithelial tissue. Okay, bone is a connective tissue, cementum is a connective tissue, dentin is a connective tissue. So we're going to talk about that, okay? And then nerve and muscle, we're not going to focus on as much. That is part of our mouth, but in the periodontium, those tissues we're talking about are mostly epithelial and connective. So here's our extracellular matrix. You guys learned about this before in another class, probably microbiology. I don't know if in our program, maybe A&P, you may have talked about what the extracellular matrix is, but it is the substance that's interwoven fibers that create structure in some tissue, right? So we have cells, and then in between those cells is the extracellular matrix, okay? So it's made up of these fibers. This is a little fiber that's here, collagen, constantly refreshing itself. You know, that's why we heal, that's why you shed skin cells. Y'all ever were told like dust is skin cells, and you can see light shining through and there's just like dust, and you go, let's gross, you know, that's what you've been told. But this is a great picture of the difference in like cell to extra cellular matrix. So here in the epithelial tissue, there's lots and lots of cells. You can see them, right? They're differentiated. And then not as much extracellular matrix. It's in there, but there's not as much of it. Down here, this is the connective tissue. We've got blood supply, right? And nerve supply. But here, these little fibers here are mostly going to be extracellular matrix. And then you're going to have some cells sprinkled in the connective tissue. Okay? So here's information about keratinization. We already talked about this. When they move to the surface, they become stronger and also more waterproof. Okay, so when water splashes on you, it's not soaking right up, right? So we want there to be a barrier there. That's why those keratinized cells are there. Keratinized versus non-keratinized, the cells at the surface are more keratinized. They do not have a nucleus. Okay, they're not really living cells. They become so keratinized that they no longer have nuclei, and they shed away, and the ones underneath come up. Okay, they form tough, resistant layers, and like you guys told me earlier, the most heavily keratinized parts of your body are the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. Okay, and then non-keratinized do have nuclei. They're more soft and flexible. It's more like that lining of your cheeks, okay? So if you think about what your skin is like for the bottom of your feet compared to the lining of your cheeks, it's a lot more flexible there, okay? Lots of the mucosa in your body is made of non-keratinized epithelial cells. I like this. It's good to know that we want that to be soft and flexible so that we can speak and chew. You guys think about when you ever had like a super dry mouth or something wrong, and it just makes you feel like you can't chew, you can't talk very easily. So we want that nice, soft, flexible tissue. Let me make sure I'm on this. I'm gonna go back so that I don't miss anything here. On this slide, there's a little note about the basal lamina. We're gonna talk about that again in a few slides. But the basal lamina is the thin mat of extracellular matrix that's secreted by epithelial cells, and it supports the epithelium. I believe, see this blue here? This is likely considered the basal lamina. Okay. So epithelial cells are avascular. So that means they do not, avascular means not vascular, right? So no blood cells, no blood vessels. They receive their oxygen and nourishment from underlying vessels of connective tissue, and that process is called diffusion, okay? So they get their nutrients from underlying tissue through diffusion. Y'all with me? Okay. All right, so that's epithelial tissue. Do you guys feel like you have a decent handle on epithelial tissue? We're talking about keratinization, what has nuclei, what doesn't, okay? We're gonna come back to a couple of times the difference in what has more extracellular matrix and cells and what has the opposite, okay? But that is what we need to know for this chapter for epithelial cells. Okay, the second type of tissue is connective tissue. So connective tissue fills the spaces in the body between the tissues and organs and supports or binds other tissues to it, okay? In connective tissue, the cells are more sparse and there's more extracellular matrix. The cells that you're gonna see in connective tissue are fibroblasts that come from the extracellular matrix, macrophages, A lot of these are immune cells that we're gonna talk about in the process of immunity, right? So macrophages devour invading microorganisms. Neutrophils devour invading microorganisms. And then lymphocytes that are also cells that are part of the immune system. So we get to that in another chapter. But they are in the connective tissue. Here are the types of connective tissue in our dentition. Cementum is a connective tissue. Dentin, alveolar bone, and pulp. They are all considered connective tissues. Enamel is not a connective tissue. It is considered epithelial tissue. Okay? It's on the outside, it's not connecting the insides. All right, this is about the junction between epithelial cells and connective tissue, okay? So we've seen this already in a different picture, but it's labeled differently now. That interface between connective tissue and epithelial cells is usually a wavy interface, but in some specialized areas, it's smooth. I will show that to you in another picture too. Why would it be wavy? What would be the purpose of a connection being wavy? Okay, to provide more structure, right? So it's right here, epithelium, it reaches down, a wavy epithelial tissue provides the structure. Let's see. Can be wavy or smooth. Well, that's on the next slide. Pay attention here to what we term these, okay? So we have these little peaks and valleys, right? So where the epithelial tissue reaches down into the connective tissue, it's called an epithelial ridge, okay? So it's kind of like, this is the epithelial tissue, these are the epithelial ridges, right? And then these are the connective tissue papilla that come in and they fit together, okay? So connective tissue papilla comes from the connective tissue and reaches into the epithelial tissue. Epithelial ridge juts out and reaches into the connective tissue. Does that make sense? It's like a little puzzle. If you have a smooth boundary, there's not any ridges, okay? It's just smooth, and that's in specialized epithelial tissues. We will see that. And that is part of the periodontia. We have that in the periodontia. So here's the function of the wavy boundary. This is what I was talking about. It helps with adhesion of the tissues by creating surface area, allows skin to resist mechanical forces, and provides larger area for the epithelium to receive nourishment. So remember those epithelial cells, they need nourishment from the connective tissue because they're avascular. So when it's wavy, you have more area for nourishment to take place. And you can think about that, like if you had a ribbon, okay? And you have one that's totally straight and then one that's all wavy, and in those two states, they're the same length. But if you stretch that wavy one out, right, it would be really, really long. That's more surface area for nourishment. So wavy interface helps with nourishment that way. Okay, so just to make sure y'all are getting it. When I say interface, what am I talking about? Somebody who feels confident, give me an answer. Emily.
Where the epithelial cells and the connective link.
Tissue.
Yeah.
Where they meet.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. Just want to make sure we're clear on what we're talking about. The interface is where they connect to each other, where they come together, okay? So sometimes it's wavy, sometimes it's smooth. This is wavy that we're talking about. cell junctions. So the word interface and the word junction are almost similar, right? It's things coming together, attaching. So in epithelial cell junctions, some epithelial cells are attached to other epithelial cells, and some of them are attached to the basal lamina and the connective tissue underneath. Okay, those little junctions give strength to the tissues. I like the images of desmosomes and hemidesmosomes. They look like little clips that clip together or grab onto something, and that helps me kind of understand that they're hooking together, okay? Or like a puzzle piece again, okay? The more mechanical stress on a tissue, the more abundant their cell junctions will be, okay? So these junctions are called desmosomes and hemidesmosomes, and they look like this, okay? So you can see a desmosome connects epithelial cell to epithelial cell. Okay, so there's one on each epithelial cell and it comes together, okay, and forms one whole desmosome to connect epithelial cells. A hemidesmosome connects an epithelial cell to something else, okay? So in this case, it's connective tissue. You got it? You with me? You see the little clips, okay? So in that epithelial tissue, there's extracellular matrix, but they also hook to each other, okay? So the little skeleton of the cell is hooked together by desmosomes. What type of tissue do full desmosomes hook together? The cells, okay? Epithelial cells. What is a hemidesmosome connecting? A cell to something else, okay? The basal lamina here. Do you remember what the basal lamina is? Yeah, remember it's at the top of that wavy interface of the connective tissue, okay? So if you can think about that, that's how those are being held in place. That's how they're getting their structure. You got it, Matt? You're like looking at me like. Okay, so cell to cell, desmosomes. Cell to basal lamina, hemidesmosome. Okay, so what does hemi mean? Half. Okay, so that should be pretty easy to differentiate. Okay, and they look just like little clips that clip together. Okay, if you were to take a desmosome and go, then you have two hemidesmosomes. Okay, that's how they attach to each other. Also, this text, I love the images. I feel like they're super helpful. The way that they're like labeled. So I include a lot of them in our PowerPoints, but there's some that are in the text that I may not have in the PowerPoint. So I, in my own studying of this material, want to let you know that there was a lot of creating these and then going back to the book. So that would probably be a good way to study for quizzes and exams, is to have your book and like see, here's what Miss Mann gave us in the PowerPoint, and then kind of look for any extra information that might be in the text right there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the gingiva. Y'all know a lot about gingiva, right? You think? You're about to learn a lot more about gingiva than you already have known at this point. But it's good. It helps you understand healing and immunology and disease process, okay? So the gingiva consists of an epithelial layer and underlying connective tissue. So the outer layer is epithelial tissue, okay? Inside, that gives it structure, is connective tissue, right? Here are the main areas. Remember we said it is stratified squamous epithelium, and it functions really well in a wet environment. That's what we want, right? There are 3 anatomical areas. This is a great image. Here's the oral epithelium that faces out into the mouth. And then here's our food gingiva, right? We peek over, and this is the sulcular epithelium junctional epithelium, okay? Oral epithelium covers free gingiva and also some of the attached gingiva. The attached gingiva is still oral epithelium, okay? What does this look like? A wavy interface, okay? What does this look like? A smooth interface, okay? So here's some specialized tissue that has a smooth interface. That's what that difference is, okay? So here, why do you think this tissue is wavy? It's the outer tissue of your mouth. What are we trying to withstand out here? Chewing, talking, all the things, okay? So if this was smooth, it might tear more easily, it might not have as much structure, so it has that nice wavy interface with the connective tissue. It also is subject to biofilm and things that make it inflamed. So if this were inflamed, what would be the benefit of this wavy interface? Remember, these don't have any vascularity, right? Where does its vascularity come from? Under here. So if it needs to heal, what does it need? Nourishment, right? Blood, supplies, cells coming at it, okay? So that's one of the reasons why that is a wavy interface right there. We need all the nourishment we can get, and we need all the structure we can get. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, this is really cool because it's an actual histological picture instead of a diagram. I love these. This is what it looks like under a microscope, okay? These are epithelial cells. You can see the really keratinized ones, okay, that are out here. You can see the epithelial ridges that are reaching down into the connective tissue. You can see the connective tissue papilla that are reaching out into the epithelium. So this is oral epithelium, right? So here's connective tissue, here's the epithelial tissue, the epithelium. Lots of collagen fibers in here, which means it's made up of a lot of, what is there a lot of in connective tissue? Extracellular matrix, okay? Nice job. Okay, so, let's see. We already talked about keratin. There's also a term para-keratinized, which is tissues that are partially keratinized, okay, instead of one or the other. So you see some of that happening in between. Like, see how there's some of these that look like they have little nuclei in them, okay? There's probably some para-keratinized tissues in between here that are going from keratinization to non-keratinization. Okay, in health, oral epithelium joins the connective tissue in a wavy interface. Okay, does this help? Is this making sense to you guys? It's a lot. Okay. All right. The oral epithelium, we said this 3 times, is made of stratified squamous epithelium. There's 4 layers to the oral epithelium. You have a basal cell layer that are cube-shaped, a prickle cell layer. I like that it's named for what it looks like. It has little spiky edges, okay? Spine-like cells. Granular cell layer, they're flattened and starting to increase in keratinization. And then a keratinized cell layer. So each type of gingival epithelium has a different layering system of cells. That's what these next few slides are about. So oral epithelium, where is that located? Yes, facing into the oral cavity, okay? So it's what you see when you smile, right? That's your oral epithelium. It has basal cell layer cells, prickle cell layer, granular cell layer, keratinized cell layer. It's continuous with the oral epithelium, which just means when that oral epithelium crests over the papilla and goes into sulcular, it's turning directly into sulcular epithelium. Extends from the gingival margin to the coronal edge of the junctional epithelium. It is thin and non-keratinized. It is also permeable, allowing fluid to flow from the gingival connective tissue into the sulcus. So we've talked a lot about gingival curvicular fluid. We've said that word a lot in your last in theory, and if we said it the other day in here. That gingival curvicular fluid comes from the underlying connective tissue, and because the sulcular epithelium is permeable, it's allowed to flow into the sulcus. Okay? The sulcular epithelium only has 3 cell layers: the basal cell layer and prickle cell layer, and then its most superficial layer is called the superficial cell layer. Flattened cells without keratin. In health, it has a smooth interface. So you guys saw that in that previous picture, right? This one right here. Here is the sulcular epithelium. It has a smooth interface. Okay, we've also learned a lot about junctional epithelium, right? Here it is on a more histological level, and a more microscopic anatomy level. It forms the base of the sulcus, joins the gingiva of the tooth. In health, it is slightly coronal to the CEJ. You guys already know that, right? In health, the junctional epithelium is attached slightly coronal to the CEJ. It's thin and non-keratinized, and it is the easiest point of entry for bacteria into the connective tissue. Okay? So, right at the base of that pocket where the junctional epithelium is the most susceptible area for microorganisms to invade the underlying connective tissue. It has 2 cell layers: basal cell layer and prickle cell layer. It is thicker on the coronal side, has 15 to 30 cells thickness at the coronal side, and then it tapers off and it's not as thick down toward the apical area. And it also has a smooth interface. Okay, so here it is in this picture, the junctional epithelium right here. Still, you can see that smooth interface. You can see this is a healthy periodontium. So you can see the junctional epithelium is attaching from here all the way down to here. So it's actually a little coronal to the CEJ. Okay? This is a great picture of all the little cell layers. It looks like a lot with the little letters, but there's a key to it. Okay, so you can see actually on this image, it tells you in the notes right underneath, like prickle cell layer, superficial layer. Okay, so here's the oral epithelium. We've got it here. It's a nice wavy interface here. Some of that wavy goes right here, right? So here's their 4 layers: basal layer, prickle layer, granular layer, and then the flatter keratinized layer. Okay, here's the sulcular epithelium. It has basal cell, prickle cell, and then it's called superficial layer of cells. Okay, and then the junctional epithelium is only 2 cells wide, right? 2 types. Okay, the basal cell layer and the prickle cell layer. Y'all got it? Okay. Y'all feel like you're clear on like where the junctional epithelium is, where the sulcular epithelium is, where the oral epithelium is? It's made of these layers of cells. You can see here they've illustrated a little bit better like the types of cell layers. So here is the basal cell layer down here close to the connective tissue. Okay, and then as they become a little spikier, more spine-like, they are prickle cell layer. Okay, so these that have little projections. And then junctional epithelium is the closest thing we get to a seal around our teeth. So we want it to be nice and tight and nice and healthy. The body's attempt to seal the opening created during eruption, and it provides attachment between the gingiva and the tooth, sealing the base of the periodontal pocket. You guys know that. There's a note here that says the epithelial cells play a role in defending the periodontium from bacterial infection by signaling the immune response. So that's coming. That's why we're learning about the epithelial cells and the connective tissue, because it all is connected to how our body responds to fighting off the bacteria that gets down in there. Okay. All right, this is the CEJ area and the edge of the junctional epithelium, and some information about the attachment here. So you can see all the things we've talked about. Here are the epithelial cells. These are attached to each other. So what's this? A desmosome. These are attached to the basal lamina. So what are these? Hemidesmosomes. Okay. This is the basal lamina. Okay. There's an internal and external. The internal basal lamina is between the junctional epithelium and the tooth. So here's a nice picture of where that exists. The internal basal lamina exists between the junctional epithelium and enamel or cementum. Okay. The cells next to the tooth form hemidesmosomes that attach the internal lamina to the tooth surface. Okay. And then the external basal lamina is illustrated right here. This thin blue line that's here. It's between the junctional epithelium and the gingival connective tissue. So there's always a connection. That basal lamina exists in two different layers. The internal is toward the tooth, and the external is toward the gingival connective tissue. Okay. Cells next to the gingiva form hemidesmosomes that attach the external basal lamina with the gingival connective tissue. And then you have these gingival fibers. Remember we talked before about fiber bundles. There's a little bit about that here too. The gingival fibers help to attach the gingival connective tissue to the PDL as well, and to the cementum. Okay. So some makeup of the gingival connective tissue, that was all about oral epithelium, right? Oral epithelium, sulcular epithelium, and junctional epithelium. So now we're going to talk about the actual gingival connective tissue. Okay, is it mostly cells or mostly extracellular matrix? The gingival connective tissue, is it going to be more cells or more extracellular matrix? Extracellular matrix, good, okay. It is also known as the lamina propria. Provides solidity to the gingiva. It attaches gingiva to the root cementum and alveolar bone. And it has abundance of extracellular matrix and few cells. The types of cells you're going to see there, we said this earlier, macrophages, neutrophils, lymphocytes, mast cells, fibroblasts. Those are the type of cells that are living in the connective tissue. And then in the extracellular matrix, you've got all these fibrous and elastic structures that are helping provide structure to that tissue. Okay, here's the percentages. You guys can study that. Okay, more than half of it is protein fibers and collagen fibers. The collagen what? The extracellular matrix, and then what are these? Macrophage, fibroblast, lymphocytes, cells. This is an image of a capillary, so that's blood supply, right? Okay. So how do these get nourishment? How do epithelial cells get their nourishment? From the underlying connective tissue, okay? Do epithelial cells have blood supply? Where do they get their nourishment? From the connective tissue. Go put it together. Okay. All right, here's some fiber bundles that help connect the gingival connective tissue to the other structures. A network of rope-like collagen fiber bundles is located coronal to the crest of the alveolar bone. So we're going to talk about two different types of fiber groups. This is the supragingival fiber bundles, meaning it's at the crest of the tooth, okay? At the gingival crest, at the alveolar crest. They are embedded in the gel-like extracellular matrix of the gingival connective tissue. Okay, so the fiber bundles are embedded into the extracellular matrix, and the junctional epithelium and gingival fibers are known collectively as the dentogingival unit. So here's all these supragingival fiber bundles that are providing structure and attachment and strength to that area, fibrous strength to the gingiva. Here's their function. Remember I told you make sure you know the functions of things. Okay, so the function of the supragingival fiber bundles are to reinforce the attachment of the junctional epithelium, to provide rigidity to the free gingiva so that it can withstand chewing forces, to connect the free gingiva with root cementum and alveolar bone, helps hold things together, and to connect adjacent teeth to one another. That's the supragingival fibers. Here is an illustration of the 9 supragingival fiber bundles. Okay, it looks like a lot. I could look at this picture for a long time. Look at it, see what things attached to what. Sulcular is really easy. See that this orange circle that goes right around the tooth? Okay, and then in this image, it's kind of in cross section. So sulcular fibers go around the tooth. Alveolo-gingival go from the bone to the gingiva. Dentogingival are these little pink ones that are going from the tooth, dento, to the gingiva. Periosteogingival, that's these here. They're a little lower on the alveolar bone, going to the gingiva. Intergingival, that's this little green line, it's kind of on the outer layer of the gingiva. So you guys spend time with this. Me standing here showing these to you is not gonna soak it in. You need to look through these and kind of see. Remember when we learned some of these last time? These are a different group than what we learned in theory. And we're still have the ones we learned in theory. That's actually on like the next slide or two. But same kind of idea. Think about what the name is. So alveolo is gonna be bone and gingival is gingiva, right? So dento is gonna be tooth. Inter is in between. Trans is across, right? So keep those things in mind. Here's, let's see, these little ones, transeptal are going from tooth to tooth, but it's just building a really nice web of structures and fibers that help connect everything and provide rigidity and more solid structure to the gingiva. You good? Okay. Okay, then we have PDL fibers. So those were supragingival fiber bundles. We also have fibers of the PDL. You guys have already learned these. I think it'll be more of a review for you. Okay, they're rope-like collagen fibers between the cementum and the bone. They have rich supply of nerves and blood vessels. So the PDL is super nutritive. PDL helps nourish the cementum. Provide support. There's sensory properties to the PDL. So there's pain and tactile pressure. That's why a lot of times if people chew really hard, they might injure the PDL, and it hurts. There's sensory nerves there. Okay, and then the embedded ends are known as what? Sharpie fibers. I think that's a fun word for some reason. It just makes me think about that. So here's the Sharpie fibers here that are embedding the PDL into the bone and into the cementum. Okay, so here's the PDL around the tube, all the different types of fibers. And then the little zoomed in version, you can see PDL fibers attaching the cementum to the bone, and they're embedded in by Sharpie fibers. You've seen this before, okay? Here's the PDL fiber groups. The alveolar crest fibers, horizontal fibers, interradicular fibers, oblique fibers, apical fibers. So apical is at the apex. Oblique just means horizontal, right? Not horizontal. Diagonal. I need more coffee. Horizontal means horizontal, okay? And then up into the furcation is gonna be interradicular fibers, okay? Interradicular. The furcation area is often called the interradicular area. Okay, so these are a little more simple to me than the gingival ones, the super gingival ones. So just review that, make sure you're familiar. Okay, so that's everything PDL related. And then quick discussion about cementum and alveolar bone. You guys have learned about cementum. It's mineralized tissue. It covers the roots of the tooth. You already know that. The PDL fibers embed into the cementum to attach the tooth to the bone. How's the PDL embedded into the cementum? Sharpie fibers, okay? It is involved in tooth repair and regeneration. Cementum seals and covers open dentinal tubules, and cementum is slowly formed throughout life. Cementum continues to be formed throughout life, okay? That is why older people are more prone to hypercementosis, or people who clench their teeth together, that mechanical force makes them more prone to hypercementosis. Okay. Oh, I want to make sure I note this under PDL fibers. The function is down there in your notes: nutritive, formative, resorptive, and then there's another note about fiber bundles. So make sure you know what the function of the PDL is. This is another actual picture of an interface, kind of, okay? So here, make sure I get everything right. A thin layer of cementum covers the dentin of the root. So this blue line is cementum. This is thin. So cementum is not super thick, right? It's a thin layer that's here. So if this is cementum, what's this? Right next to it. Somebody said it, say it louder. The PDL, yes, okay? This is a thin blue line, and the PDL is attaching the cementum to the alveolar bone. This is bone. This is a histological picture. It looks crazy. It's not what you're used to because it's stained, right? So the blue line is cementum. This is the PDL right next to it. And what you can't see the Sharpie fibers here, but there's Sharpie fibers that are embedding PDL into the cementum, into the bone. reformed over its life helps the PDL regenerate, okay? That is, if you think about Sharpie fibers, so if you're getting new cells of cementum, then the Sharpie fibers are able to re-embed. So that's how it's helping regenerate the PDL. But it doesn't have its own blood supply. Cementum doesn't have its own blood supply. So cementum is depending on the PDL for its nourishment. Here is acellular versus cellular cementum. The acellular cementum is composed mostly of Sharpie fibers, and it has no living cells. Acellular means no cells, right? So that cementum is up here in the coronal half of the cementum. Coronal cervical third to cervical half of the tube is covered by what kind of cementum? Acellular cementum. And then the apical half and the interradicular areas are covered by cellular cementum. So cellular cementum contains cementocytes and fibroblasts, and they're at the apical portion of the cementum, of the tube. Okay. Cementum removal is not necessary to eliminate bacteria. Do you guys remember talking about the history of scaling and root planing? And that there used to be the thought that you needed to remove the outer layer of cementum to really arrest disease. Well, we learned that cementum has growth factors in it. So we want it to stay there because it helps regenerate the PDL with those growth factors. So we don't want to remove cementum. It is super important to the healing process and regenerative factors, okay? That note is under the previous slide. If you want to make sure you have that, that helps kind of clarify like the whole, it's helping the PDL. It has growth factors. It has cementocytes and fibroblasts that help with growth. So we don't want to remove it. We want it to continue providing those growth factors so that the PDL can be regenerated. All right, you guys already know this. There's 3 possible arrangements of the CEJ. Okay, so we kind of looked at the CEJ earlier in a small way and how the junctional epithelium attaches. Regardless of how this happens, the junctional epithelium still is socket is what you would see in the socket is the alveolar bone proper, okay? What's the other word for socket? You're saying it, just really quiet. Huh? Who said it? Sabrina, did you say it?
Is it alveolus?
Yes, alveolus.
Oh, sorry. You have good ears, by the way.
Do what?
I said, you have good hearing. How do you hear that?
I do, I'm a witch, that's what Lucas would say. That's a funny thing, Zach is always like, she's a witch. Like if I do something, like find something they've been looking for 10 minutes in 20 seconds. But he's like, how did you know that? She's a witch, which is real dangerous, because he's gonna tell people I'm a witch. No, he actually seems to understand it, but it's kind of fun. So Sabrina, I am super witch hearing.
Well, you used to be a teacher though, too, right?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I guess. All right, and then the other things about the alveolar bone, there's two major cell types. You've heard this before, osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Which one are the building cells? Blasts build, osteoclasts are breaking down, right? Okay. They remove mineral material. The extracellular matrix contains collagen fibers and gel-like substances. So there's extracellular matrix in the bone because bone is also connective tissue, right? So there's an extracellular matrix within the bone. See this is another great histological image. So here's the cancellous bone, right? It looks pretty cool here, the trabecular bone. And then the thick outer lining. So here's alveolar bone proper. And then the cortical bone you can't see as well, but mostly it's like at the lining of the jaw, you know. Let's see, has blood vessels and nerve innervation. Bone is vascular, okay? Bone has vascularity and nerve supply. The bone matrix is rigid because of mineral deposition of calcium and phosphate. So we have now gone through the microscopic anatomy of all the tissues of the periodontum. Are you okay? I try my best to break it down for you and keep connecting them so that you can see how it's all connected. If I click through here, would you like to see if you have any specific questions about these things before we say we're done today? So maybe the images. So here's the extracellular matrix. Okay. Any questions about it? Lots of fibers, right? Helps provide structure. Here's the wavy interface here. Remember that? With this blue line. The basal lamina. Okay. Remember our cell junctions. Okay. Which one is this? That connects an epithelial cell to another epithelial cell. Okay. The connection between the basal lamina and the lamina and then epithelial cell and basal lamina. That one's a hemidesmosome. Okay. Remember the three types of gingival epithelium. The outer layer of the gingiva, the oral epithelium, sulcular, and junctional. Okay, you guys know that. The types of cells in each one. Make sure you look over those. Here's a trick. The first two are the same in all the layers. Okay? The basal cell and the prickle cell. Then in the sulcular, you have the superficial layer. In the oral epithelium, you have the granular layer and the keratinous layer. Okay? Here's our internal basal lamina and external. I love this picture. I feel like it shows a lot of the things, like everything kind of put All right, the fiber, this is when y'all looked at me like, ugh, this is gonna be so much to memorize. All of these. This is when y'all started looking at me like, ugh. Okay, this is gonna be fine, okay? You just need to spend some time looking at it, what goes where. Once you get it in your head a little bit and make the words make sense, I think you'll be okay. Okay? Really and truly though, I want you to make sure you know what the difference is between supergingival fibers and fibers with PDL. Okay? So that's here. Okay, make sure you know the difference between cellular and acellular cementum, where it's at, okay? And then the types of bone, okay? What's the two words that are the same? Excellent. If I took this tooth out, you could see bone, what would you be looking at? The alveolar bone proper. Okay, good. Good, okay? Questions? Okay, Allie said I didn't have any joy on Monday, so today we choose joy. Okay, even though we have the microscopic anatomy lecture that feels like, what in the world I thought I knew stuff about, right? But if you spend some time with it, I think you'll be good. It all makes sense. If you need help helping it make